2 minutes.
It's very nice, isn't it? It's very simple. Today it'd be good if you had this page open in your booklets. Okay, towards the back.
Namo tassa
bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sorry?
What's the meaning of this prayer?
It is we are kind of bowing down to the Buddha who is self-enlightened. Samma Sambuddha means self-enlightened. Namo tassa means we are bowing down to the teacher who is a self-enlightened Buddha. Just kind of paying our respect to the Buddha. So in Buddha there are three enlightenment these are categories which they say. One is Pacheka Buddha, who is self-enlightened but does not change. Samma Sambuddha is self-enlightened but he teaches. And there is Savaka Buddha. Savaka Buddha is they listen to the Buddha's teaching and become fully awakened. So we can all become Savaka Buddha because we are listening from the teaching of the Buddha.
Okay, good. So, welcome, and this evening we're going to be looking at the Sutta number 18 from the Madhupindika, and it's called the Honeyball Sutta. Thus have I heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the Sakyang country at Kapilavatthu in Nigroda's Park. Then, when it was morning, the Blessed One dressed and taking his bowl and outer robe, went into Kapilavatthu for alms. I think Kapilavatthu was where he was born, wasn't it? Yeah, so this is his hometown. When he had wandered for alms in Kapilavatthu and had returned from his alms round, after his meal, he went to the great wood for the day's abiding. And entering the great wood, sat down at the root of a bilva sapling for the day's abiding. Dandapani, the Sakyan, whilst walking and wandering for exercise, also went to the great wood. And when he had entered the great wood, he went to the bilva sapling where the Blessed One was and exchanged greetings with him. So his name Dandapani means he's holding a staff. And apparently he was actually quite a young man, and the staff was golden. So the staff was an affectation rather than something that was necessary. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he stood at one side, leaning on his stick, which is a far from courteous way of presenting yourself, and asked the Blessed One, "What does the recluse assert? What does he proclaim?" This is more of a challenge rather than a genuine inquiry.
And one more thing, the way he stands is leaning on the stick, which is not a position which, when you are speaking to a Buddha, you have to be respectful. So the way he was standing was disrespectful. For the monks also, there are certain positions where you are not supposed to respond if they don't be respectful to the monk. So he was not being respectful over here in this thing. So the response and the question is also seen in that kind of context.
So the Buddha replies, "Friend, I assert and proclaim in such a way that one does not quarrel with anyone in the world, with its gods, its Maras, and its Brahmas, in this generation, with its recluses and Brahmins, its princes and its people, in such a way that perceptions no more underlie that Brahmin, representing himself, who abides detached from sensual pleasures, without perplexity, shorn of worry, free from craving for any kind of being." This is a very neutral response. When this was said,
one other thing, Brahmin means the Arahant. So he is referring to an Arahant. Like Naga, we said it is a kind of a name for Arahant. This Brahmin is also a name for an Arahant.
when this was said, Dandapani the Sakyan shook his head, wagged his tongue, raised his eyebrows until his forehead was puckered in 3 lines. Then he departed, leaning on his stick. So the whole exchange is about as discourteous as it's possible to be. Then, when it was evening, the Blessed One rose from meditation and went to Nigaroda's park, where he sat down on a seat made ready for him and told the bhikkhus, or the students, what had taken place. So what I find very interesting about this is, here's the Buddha in his hometown, and he's basically being abused. Okay. There's nothing about being a Buddha which guarantees people are going to accept you or relate to you with kindness or reverence or anything.
Bante also used to say that because he was going to his town, there were many people who were his relatives or something like that, and then they did not see him as something special. They say over here that "Ghar ki murgi dal barabar," na? So that is how one of the things is there. If it is somewhere, if you're familiar, then you kind of familiarity breeds contempt kind of thing is also effaced.
Then a certain student asked the Blessed One, "But Venerable Sir, how does the Blessed One assert and proclaim his teaching in such a way that he does not quarrel with anyone in the world, with its gods, its Maras, and its Brahmas, in this generation with its recluses and Brahmins, its princes and people? And Venerable Sir, how is it that perceptions do not underlie the Blessed One, that Brahmin who abides detached from the sensual pleasures, without perplexity, shorn of worry, free of craving for any kind of being?" So I think this is a wonderful statement, because it's in front of his students, and the students are going, well, how do you do that? Yeah. Bhikkhu, or student, as to the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a man, if nothing is found there to delight in, welcome and hold to, this is the end of the underlying tendency to lust, of the underlying tendency to aversion, of the underlying tendency to views, of the underlying tendency to doubt, of the underlying tendency to conceit, of the underlying tendency for being, of the underlying tendency to ignorance. This is the end of resorting to rods and weapons of quarrels, brawls, disputes, recrimination, malicious words, and false speech. Here, these evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. So he's touching on a subject here which seems to be extremely important. You know, how do we deal with the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset you? Yeah. This is the root of so much conflict, internally, externally. Yeah.
And one other thing is, he's saying that if something is coming up and you are holding on to it, all this happens. That is meaning that what you are not doing when something comes up, siksari.
Okay. So, that is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Sublime One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling. Okay. Then, soon after the Blessed One had gone, the students considered, now, friends, the Blessed One has risen from his seat and gone into his dwelling after giving a summary in brief, without expounding the detailed meaning. Now, who will expound this in detail? They considered. The Venerable Mahakachana is praised by the teacher and esteemed by his wise companions in the holy life. He is capable of expounding the detailed meaning. Suppose we went to him and asked him the meaning of this. So Venerable Kachana had the reputation in the Sangha as someone who was able to elaborate what the Buddha said in brief. He was one of the best at doing this. Then the bhikkhus, the students, went to the Venerable Mahakachana and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, they sat down to one side and told him what had taken place, adding, let the Venerable Mahakachana expound it to us. Now, Venerable Mahakachana, as far as I can remember, was he was quite a pithy individual. He didn't hold back in his opinions. Friends, it is as though a man needing heartwood, seeking heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood. So heartwood is the strongest and best part of the wood of a tree. Thought that heartwood should be sought from the branches and leaves of a great standing, possessed of heartwood, after he had passed over the root and the trunk. So it is with you, venerable sirs, that you think that I should be asked about the meaning of this after you passed the Blessed One, when you were face to face with the teacher. For knowing, the Blessed One knows. Seeing, he sees. He is vision, he is knowledge, he is the Dharma, he is the Holy One. He is the sayer, the proclaimer, the elucidator of meaning, the giver of the deathless, the Lord of the Dharma, the Tathagata. That was the time you should have asked the Blessed One the meaning. As he told you, so you should have remembered it. Surely, friend Kachana, knowing the Blessed One knows, seeing he sees, he is vision, etc. He is the Tathagata. That was the time when we should have asked the Blessed One the meaning. As he told us, so we should have remembered it. Yet the Venerable Mahakachana is praised by the teacher and esteemed by his wise companions in the holy life. The Venerable Mahakachana is capable of expounding the detailed meaning of this summary given in brief by the Blessed One, without expounding the detailed meaning. Let the Venerable Mahakachana expound it without finding it troublesome. So I like this passage because it's really quite a human passage. You can kind of see the character and the personality of the individuals. We tend to think of these people as elevated in some sort of way, but the whole spectrum of the way people are was present here. Then listen, friends, and attend closely to what I shall say.
And one just thing is, Mahakachana was said by the Buddha to be the best to expound. If he says something in summary, he was considered the best who could expand and elaborate. So that was the title which was given by the Buddha to him.
Yes, friend, the students replied. The Venerable Mahakachana said this. Friends, when the Blessed One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling, after giving a summary and brief, without expounding the detailed meaning, that is, student, as to the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a man, if nothing is found there to delight in, welcome and hold to, this is the end of the underlying tendency to lust. Let me just go through the rest of it. Of the underlying tendency to aversion, of the underlying tendency to views, of the underlying tendency to doubt, of the underlying tendency to conceit, the underlying tendency to desire for being, of the underlying tendency to ignorance. This is the end of resorting to rods and weapons, of quarrels, brawls, disputes, recrimination, malicious words, and false speech. Here these evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. I understand the detailed meaning of this to be as follows. Dependent on the I and forms, I consciousness arises. So we have an I, we have a form. I consciousness arises. The meeting of those three things, the I, the working I, the form, the I consciousness, is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. What one feels, that one perceives. So feeling and perception, and indeed consciousness, they come at the same time. Yes, they can't be separated. Yeah. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. Okay, so perception is about memory and the naming of things. Right? So here we have the recalling. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. So as we begin to think about something, you can perhaps think of this as bringing in all the associated thoughts and images and memories associated with that. So we have something that is building. Okay? And this proliferation, papancha, is this process of these conceptual ideas beginning to come into the mind. With what one has mentally proliferated as the source, perceptions and notions born of that mental proliferation beset a student with respect to past, future, and present forms cognizable through the eye. So this proliferation then really begins to take on a life of its own. And that's what this compound papancha sana sanka means, this proliferation of perception and notions. So I like to think of this sometimes like a tornado. You know, it starts as a small twister, yes, and it's a light colored, and then as it begins to draw things in around, it gets darker and darker because of all the debris that's being pulled in to this. So in your meditation, do you recognize this process? Yeah? Something comes up, not necessarily in the eye, but it applies to all of the senses, the mind, the ear, a sound goes, and it's, why can't people move quietly? Don't they realize I'm meditating? Oh, no, that's it. Oh, so now look where I am. And I was just getting to that, and all it just builds and builds and builds. And so this is a wonderful description of what is a practical reality that we observe of our mind. Okay. So as for
one thing is we used to learn through mind maps. That is something like we have an elephant, then we have the story of I remember the story of this thing. One person thought it was a wall. Oh, I need to kind of color the walls. Something like that also. Something which kind of multiplies your thoughts. Or somebody you remember, oh, he did this to me. maybe this I have to do to him, and all those things which comes up. It is kind of adding one thing. So if you draw anything in the middle of the circle, and then there are certain things linked to that, and then there are certain things linked to it. Is basically an endless kind of linking which can happen in the mind.
Yeah, I think the important word there is endless. There is no natural end to doing that until we choose to take responsibility for our attention. Yeah? And that's where the free will is. Do we continue to add, or do we choose to do something different? There was no free will about the image coming up in the mind. Yeah? So there's no blame for the image that appears. There's no criticism of that. There's simply, do we choose to meditate or do we not? Yeah. Dependent on the ear and sounds, dependent on the nose and odors, dependent on the tongue and flavors, dependent on the body and tangibles, dependent on the mind and mind objects, mind consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. With what one has mentally proliferated as the source, perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a student with respect to the past, the future, and present mind objects cognizable through the mind. So, this is the process of dependent origination, as it's called. Okay, and at the end of the sutta, we'll go through a description of dependent origination in its more complete form. But the description here is basically the bit you need for your meditation practice. Okay, if you can memorize just this, it's so helpful when you see your mind kicking off. Because then the kicking off will confirm this structure. And when you confirm this structure for yourself in a way that you see and understand, that is the start of wisdom. Because until you knew that, it was ignorance that we had. So then you can see that the mind not staying on the object actually builds wisdom if you observe it. And that the meditation is not about simply staying on the object with nothing happening. Yeah? It's not about simply developing a calm mind, or a still mind, or an empty mind. It's the movements of mind. And here you're having described the movements of mind from one mind state to the next. So the mind states are what one feels, one perceives. With contact as condition, there is feeling. And then what one feels, one perceives. What one perceives, one thinks about. What one thinks about, one proliferates about. Yes. What one proliferates about, then we have this mental proliferation of perceptions and notions that just spiral and spiral and spiral. And Bante's image of the mind map is great. Just how big can that mind map go? When there is the I and form and I consciousness, it is possible to point out the manifestation of contact. If our mind in the practice it becomes collected enough, then for some we can actually see the start of contact. So this manifestation of contact is possible to observe. Okay. It is possible to point out the manifestation of feeling. What is feeling? What is feeling? So what can it be? Yeah, what sensations can we have? Yeah, pleasant, unpleasant, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Yeah, those are the feelings that are coming through, and up to that point, it's automatic. We're not in control. We can't stop ourselves feeling. And when there is manifestation of feeling, it is possible to point out the manifestation of perception. Now remember, feeling and perception come at the same time. They're not a sequence. No? When you feel, you perceive that. And you can't feel without perception. Okay? When there is the manifestation of perception, it is possible to point out the manifestation of thinking. Okay, so what is the thinking going on there? What's our response to feeling? We've got this pleasant, unpleasant, neither pleasant or unpleasant. What's our response? Think of it in your meditation. Think of it in your meditation. What is it you notice?
You started out, huh?
We hold on to that feeling that.
Yes, we either hold on to it or we try and push it away.
Yeah,
So the thinking is the I like it, I don't like it mind. The I want it, I don't want it mind. And the thinking is where we first start to take it personally. That's where the I comes up. Okay? So the bit that's in our control is whether the I is there or not, whether we take it personally or not. Okay? And that I like it, I don't like it is craving. That's tanha. So the process of taking something personally creates the craving. Okay? It is possible to point out the manifestation of thinking. When there is the manifestation of thinking, it is possible to point out the manifestation of perception by perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation. So we see how that thinking then begins to spiral. And that spiraling starts off with tanha and then upadana, which is the clinging. And the clinging is the story behind why I like it or don't like it. So here's the mind map beginning to. And then we've got all of our habitual responses to that story, which is more of the mind map. And then we've got our emotional links to those habitual. And once you've got that lot coming in as well, you're going to need a very big piece of paper. Okay? All right. So when there is the ear and sound and ear consciousness, when there is the nose and odor and nose consciousness, when there is the tongue, flavor and tongue consciousness, when there is the body, tangible and body consciousness, when there is the mind, a mind object and mind consciousness, it is possible to point out the manifestation of perception by perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation. So this process is completely natural. It's not your mind is uniquely troublesome. It's the way everybody's mind is. And it's said that the Buddha was able to understand people's minds. This is a skill I don't want. I'm having trouble understanding my own. Yeah? And it kind of shows the greatness of the Buddha.
No, I think reading somebody's mind and understanding is, I think, at different levels. I think what normally now they think is about reading minds. So Bhante Vimaramsi used to say that I don't want to read others' mind because I know my mind has nonsense and their mind will also have nonsense.
Absolutely. So, when there is no I, no form, and no I consciousness, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of contact. When there is no manifestation of contact, it is
Just to preface, it's like when you are closed the eye or don't pay attention. That is the Indriya Samvara, which is also taught. Like if you are closed eye, then there is no eye contact is there.
Yeah. The other aspect of this is also recognizing the impermanence. So there's a sound that kicks something off, and then the sound is gone. So you also see that the proliferation that created from that sound, so it's recognizing the impermanence of these sense doors. We can tend to think that our thinking mind is a permanent thing that's there all the time, doing all of this. But it's only there when the conditions arise for things to be there. When there is no I and no form and no I consciousness, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of contact. When there is no manifestation of contact, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of feeling. When there is no manifestation of feeling, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of perception. When there is no manifestation of perception, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of thinking. When there is no manifestation of thinking, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of the perception by perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation. Okay? So the whole process is one that is present and absent, dependent on impermanence. You didn't ask it to come. You don't ask it to leave. The impermanence is a natural quality of the thing itself. When there is no ear, no sound, and no ear consciousness, when there is no nose, no odor, and nose consciousness, when there is no tongue, no flavor, and no tongue consciousness, when there is no body, no tangible, and no body consciousness, when there is no mind object, and no mind consciousness, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of perception by perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation. Friends, when the Blessed One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling after giving a summary in brief without expounding the detailed meaning, that is, student, as to the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset the student, if nothing is found there to delight in, welcome and hold to, this is the end of the underlying tendency to lust, the underlying tendency to aversion, the underlying tendency to views, of the underlying tendency to doubt, the underlying tendency to conceit, of the underlying tendency to desire for being, of the underlying tendency to ignorance, of the underlying, this is the end of resorting to rods and weapons, of quarrels, brawls, disputes, recrimination, malicious words, and false speech. Here, these evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. So all of these things are the fuel to generate the mind map.
Yeah.
Let's say you get a feel, in a not pleasant, not pleasant, not painful. When it's painful, you don't want it. When it's pleasant, you want it. But in a neutral thing, like it doesn't cut the chain there. You still have mental proliferation anyway happen. Even when you have a very neutral, random thought that comes up, let's say a car is passing by, right? So
Yeah.
there's nothing to like or dislike about it. So it is a neutral feeling, but then still the proliferation continues.
Well, the neutral feeling, you see, there's a difference between equanimity, which wouldn't respond even to the neutral, and we tend to be indifferent to neutral things. Well, indifference isn't the same balance as equanimity. So there'll be ripples through the mind, even if it's just something in the background.
Technically, it is said that neither painful nor pleasurable state has ignorance. So there you are not aware. So one of those things could be considered in the pleasurable thing, but this pleasurable is an unwholesome state of thing. So the kind of the feeling has been described by Buddha in many ways. One way is painful and pleasurable. Other way is painful, pleasurable, neither painful nor pleasurable. So when he is describing a painful and pleasurable, neither painful nor pleasurable state can be put in the pleasurable thing, because that is not painful at least. Okay, so when you are just sitting and on a Sunday and you have finished your coffee and you are waiting for somebody, and that 15-20 minutes goes, so you are not having a kind of any kind of pleasure. Also, there is no pain, but then but you are not kind of in a uncomfortable state. So one way of looking at it is, but then there is no understanding of that state. So that is an unwholesome state, that in that sense, because there is ignorance over there. But when you are, say, if you decide to sit after the coffee and be in meditation, you are in equanimity. That also you are neither painful nor pleasurable state, but there is full awareness is there. That is a wholesome state.
See, when we siksar, say you don't want the mind to work. Thought came. Before your mind is doing all of this craving, clinging, basically you siksar right there. Thought came and you don't even wanted to say I like it, I dislike it, etc. Isn't it like one step before?
It can be. It is based on mindfulness. When can you siksar? When you have mindfulness. When there is no mindfulness, you cannot siksar. So when you are saying I'm in a neutral space, you see a car go by and there is nothing, no register which is there. But where you have not identified with anything, okay? Over there, you may see the car and say, oh, there are too many cars or something like that. But if you are in equanimity, then that thought which is there is registered. That okay, this is there, and then I can let that thought go, because your mindfulness is there. So mindful.
You still have contact. Consciousness also comes up.
Yes.
Feeling doesn't come.
Feeling is there.
You have contact, you have feeling, and with feeling you have perception and consciousness. You're not in control of that.
Is it in the background?
It's a natural quality of
Cognition.
cognition. Yeah. So it's just it's there. It's what happens at that moment that you have choice. Now, at the moment, you catch thoughts when they're nascent thoughts, but you can catch thoughts earlier than that. Okay, in the sense that you're at that feeling stage where they've not actually formed into a thought, because it's a movement of mind. And remember what mindfulness is. It's a seeing the movement of mind from one mind state to another. So you can see the arising of these before the craving starts. Okay?
So that 1, 2, 3 doesn't happen. Just that is at the one and you recognize it.
Yeah.
Contact still happens.
Yeah.
You know that there is a
Contact.
body.
You've got a body. You're going to have contact.
Yeah.
Yep.
Contact happens, and before
And the
So
feeling
the
and the
thought
feeling
is
will
contact.
and the feeling will arise. Okay. But the downstream from that may not.
In a road like this, where the cars are coming at regular interval, can I normalize that? Car will come. So first contact when it happens.
Then you are kind of being indifferent. That's what he said.
Yes.
No?
Let's take a mosquito
Equanimity,
bite.
equanimity is being equanimous about whatever arises, not screaming out things you don't want to interrupt you.
Let's take a mosquito bite
Mhm.
when you're meditating.
Mhm.
Right? So I think usually in a normal scenario you will
Mhm.
auto reaction go try and kill it.
Mhm.
The entire thing is played out. Mosquito bit you, your mind said this is painful. You then went on to the next action.
Mhm. Mhm.
When you're meditating, you can see the mosquito bite.
Mm.
So, and then I don't think you get to the place of saying, is this painful or is this?
That's not a choice you're making. That's a response, a cognitive response to contact.
But
Okay.
is it like would you perceive, would that thought come up saying, oh, this is
Yes. You see, don't confuse unpleasant with a particular sensation. So I had one student many years ago now who was doing a course with me, a meditation course, and she had chronic stomach pains. And she'd been to all the doctors and all the rest of it, and no one could find anything. And the first 4 weeks or so, no change whatsoever. Okay, but she was developing a capacity to observe. And then the next week she came back, and she just looked different. And said, oh, what's going on? And she said, I know what the pain is. And I said, well, okay, can you say some more? And she said, yes, I'm afraid of death. She was in her 70s. And when I wake up, if the pain's there, I know I'm alive. And so she had associated having the pain with the reassurance about death, that I'm still alive. And once she'd seen that connection, the pain went. Okay, so don't think unpleasant, because it was a pleasant experience for her to have that pain. Okay, so what's experienced as pleasant and unpleasant depends on the psychological position. It's not an absolute. Yeah. Someone else want to say something?
Yeah.
Just curious, did your fear of death also go at the same time?
She was able to. She had never expressed her fear of death. So, in the process of expressing her fear of death, it brought something out which had been internal.
Only Arhant, there will not be a fear of death.
So basically, whenever there's contact, feeling is automatic.
Yes.
Feeling and perception are automatic.
Feeling, perception, and consciousness occur at the same time. You can't separate them.
What you can then cut off is the clinging.
No, the craving. Craving. The I like it, I don't like it mind. Tanha. How does craving manifest? Tension and tightness in the mind and the body. How do you release the craving? 6 hours.
But if you are in a kind of a very deep kind of mind states, there but they used to say that you will be able to see even the contact happening, and that time you can let it go. The mind can stay. So he had a student who was in Indonesia. They could sit for 3 hours without any kind of thought arising. There was one other student in Malaysia, Penang Hill. He was a very aged, I think 70 years old man. He used to come.
Not so ancient.
Huh?
Not so ancient.
But he was a wonderful meditator. It was his first time he had come. in his 70s, he had come to Bante to do the meditation. He said, "My children have gone away and I'm alone." So then he used to, after doing the retreat, second time he came. When Bante came back to Penang, the second time he came there, and he said that I could sit for 3 hours, and out of that 3 hours, I can be aware of whatever is happening in this thing, in the meditation. So there can be states which are there, but you should not strive for it, obviously, but it can naturally come with practice and with good karma in the past. If you have then that states of mind can also come. But as you were saying, the craving is the fundamental point where if you can find it, then that would be kind of the best meditation you would have.
That's
So,
the step before the craving.
no, not just just the craving. At the time of craving, you are able to kind of catch it. Then you'd see that your meditation has changed a lot.
But basically, once you crave is when the story starts.
Crave is when you start taking it personally. Clinging is when the story starts. Craving is where you're establishing a preference. I like it, I don't like it, I want it, I don't want it. Clinging is when the if you like, the card index. We have the card
What
index.
happens if you're indifferent?
Hmm?
You're indifferent.
There's
Well,
also a
I'm
story.
not
There's
liking it,
still
not liking
there's
it.
still a story.
There is still a story.
Yeah.
Bhante used to say all the stories, why I like it, why I don't like it, all the justifications, all the kind of views, kind of theories which are there, philosophies which are there, all of them come over here. Why you like some people are in pain, there are one sect of kind of they give themselves a lot of pain. Even they have to kind of remove the hair, they would pluck the hair, not a shave like a Buddhist monk would do. He would shave. They would pluck each individual hair, so that they are giving themselves so much pain because pain is a kind of a way of in there to kind of burn off their karma or something like that. So all that thing, so they kind of view their pain in a different kind of light. They will stand in one leg or all those things. So that they are viewing that. So that story is maybe I like this pain because now I think I am burning my karma. So that can be story, can be anything.
So, not that one of these is happening at a time, right? All the sense doors, all the sense consciousness, all these are happening. So all of these threads are basically running.
Yeah, but it is running single. It's not running parallel. One at a time.
Different senses.
Yeah.
different-
Think of it as multiplexing, right? Rather than parallel processing.
But each of the consciousness is different. Right? So consciousness. All of those could be happening in parallel.
Yeah, that is what he's saying, no?
That's not in. They're not happening in parallel. You do one. You know, you're not doing them all at the same time. If you were doing them all at the same time, you couldn't meditate.
No, not me.
Anybody.
Anybody.
Everybody.
All the senses
But
are
it happens
receiving
so
contact
quickly.
at the same time.
It looks like it, but it's not. Okay, it's happening so fast. Yeah, but they're not all going at the same time.
But can you reach a state where you can see it happening in sequence? Because what happens is it's happening so fast that you can't catch the sequence.
Well, as your mind develops, it has the lucidity to recognize when things are occurring and choosing to 6R, which at that time would simply be a relax. Yeah.
Bhante used to say there is one a teacher in Burma who actually teaches everybody to see each kind of mind movement So Bande used to say this is 100,000 rising and passing away of the sound consciousness. So he would take them to kind of see each kind of arising and passing away. But he says it takes 10 years for you to reach there.
You're getting enlightened in 7.
So you had a question, huh?
Yeah, so this sutta seems to talk about, I pick up two different perspectives. One is it says, if nothing is found to enlighten, which seems to be after context, seems to be stories. But then there's also this, if there's no I, no form, no contact, etc., then nothing. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it seems to me that these are almost pointing in two different directions. Do you have any thoughts to weave them together?
No, how?
So with the first one, where nothing is found to the light in your church, that one is suggesting that contact has already come up. There's still I, there's still. But this other one about how, with the cessation of the I,
Yeah, so he's kind of one way to look at it is wherever your six are, then next steps are not there. So there can be a stage where this thought has arisen. And the thought you do, then there is no mental proliferation.
Sure. So does that imply? I think I agreed with you at first, but then so there's the 6R, and then talks about where there's no I, no form, etc.
I think that paragraph is to emphasize the fact that it's not a constant stream, that that's impermanent, that the I consciousness depends on other things. So there's another dependency. So if there was no I, there'd be no I consciousness. So showing that there's a dependency built into the actual sensory process, and then you're seeing the dependency played out when you're taking delight in something.
If you don't mind, would you be able to read the relevant thing again? If you don't.
Yeah. No, that's fine. So when there is no I, no form, and no I consciousness, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of contact. Okay.
This is the I.
And then, so how does that paragraph end? Like, why are they
So
interested in the lack of manifestation?
because if there's no contact, then nothing is downstream. And then the previous paragraph is to say, if you don't take delight, there's nothing downstream. But contact has already been there. So for me, when I read this, it's about seeing that the manifestation is dependent upon things present. You see, we think seeing is more difficult to do, but think of it as sound. We think we hear continuously, but we only hear when there is something to be heard. We only think when there's something to be thought. So I think that's the paragraph is saying that's a reality which we might not have considered. And then when we are thinking, there's the reality of the dependent origination.
And at one stage, even our attention can, so when our attention is not there on the sound, we are not listening to the sound. So that can also be a stage where our attention can kind of negate certain things from arising. So you may be in meditation and there may be some sounds, but your attention is not going, and then there is nothing happening related to that sound.
But contact would be happening, no? That's a good one.
Not unless you're paying attention.
So
Contact is happening, consciousness is probably not there.
No, the I.
If your attention is not there.
No, because what the Buddha is saying is, I, form, and I consciousness. I and form create I consciousness. So if we haven't seen something, if the I consciousness hasn't arisen. The form is still there. So in some sense, there is no I, because we haven't paid attention through the I. So the I manifests because we pay attention.
So there is awareness, but there is not.
There isn't, at that moment, there is no awareness through the I.
So it can be the peripheral, like that as well.
So, for instance, there's been a lot of research around how we process imagery. And so much of imagery that we process is actually memorized, not actually what we're processing. We process about 8% of what's available coming in. Okay, so if we're walking down the road and we've got skyscrapers and we've always known a landscape with skyscrapers, we don't see the detail. It's all filled in automatically from our previous experience. So the I is not operating at that time in that way. It's only when we pay attention do we actually see the difference. Now you can see this quite nicely when you look at a clock with the second hand. When you look at a clock with the second hand, initially the second hand will stay still, and then it will go left, and then it will go like this.
Also, we can read the jumbled words. Words with jumbled letters, we can read.
Mhm.
That's something like that.
Usually if the first and the last one are the correct, then we can read it. Okay? So even though we've got an I, the I is not operating. It's only when we pay attention does the I operate. Yes, please.
So I think what's coming to my mind now is as this process develops, what we care about changes. We stop caring about things like, in a very broad scale, right? We stop caring about things that make us angry and that make us really greedy, etc. And that changes how our attention is. When we stop caring about things that make us angry or really greedy, we don't pay attention.
No, caring is, it is not about how we care, we understand. So one of the examples the Buddha gives is of the poison, if I give you a glass which is very sweet and a drink, but it is poison, would you drink it? They say, no, we will not drink that. But if it is, say something medicinal, like a yogurt drink which you use to kind of upset stomach, there's yogurt is there, there's honey is there, there's molasses is there. It's very pleasant to drink, but it will help you. So would you drink it? Now you know what would kind of hurt you and what would not hurt you, and then you would not kind of be in that space. So before smoking was considered to be this thing, globally everybody kind of smokes less now, because wherever there was awareness of that, then knowingly people are not taking poison. So that is has happened. So that is so you don't care less about this thing, but you understand the context in which something exists.
So if I may give an example of the way in which care influences attention, say that you are a bird watcher and you care about birds, you find interest in birds, well then you start seeing more birds, right? You have more contact with birds, more attention to birds, as opposed to someone who doesn't care. So in this way, what we have interest in, what we have attention, affects what we have contact with.
Yes. Because if you don't care, you're indifferent until perhaps a particularly colourful one or a particularly melodious one's there. And that breaks through the indifference because that's sufficiently engaging for you to pay attention.
And then so there's also that uncaring process. I don't know how to put it, but where you stop someone who's addicted to heroin.
I think what you're saying, if I can reframe it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying care there is what I'm prepared to pay attention to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So someone who is addicted to heroin will see needles and places to get heroin, and then slowly they might stop seeing those things as they become unaddicted. And this process of meditation is similar.
Well, interesting experiment they had done in a college. So they asked the college is there. There's a road which is there. Now draw from memory the whole street, the shops and everything, and just draw the streets and give it to me. The professor says everybody draws this thing, and then the professor then says to one of them, "You smoke," and one you say, "I think you have a drinking problem." And then he kind of says you eat a lot of fast food or something like that. And then everybody says, "Oh, how is that possible?" The professor says that what shops you remember from memory were those shops, and then there are certain shops which kind of were not a part of that uh, drawing, because if the person who does not smoke is not kind of worried about the shops which sell kind of cigarettes, and the person who does not drink is not kind of blind to the shop which is there. So in that sense, yeah, correct.
So, when we close eye during meditation, are we taking a shortcut?
To what?
Because we are not using one of our senses.
Well, one of the invitations by the Buddha is to seclude the senses, because this helps the meditation. So, you know, the amount of processing time and capacity in the brain that processes sight is enormous. Yeah? And as soon as you close your eyes, that processing capacity is available to process other senses. So then you begin to see where the other senses are engaged, and you start to go from being ignorant about those to understanding and seeing that process happening out. Okay, so it's a way of recognizing how the senses are, closing your eyes, so then you can choose to seclude from the other senses. I mean, you have no idea how your body's feeling right now, but close your eyes. Close them now. You know exactly how your body's feeling. Okay?
I work with blind children quite a lot, and I find that their sense of the world and the heightened sensibilities that they have towards sound, towards touch, amazing, and their retention, ability to just listen to something and be there. And that's why when you close your eyes, everything else.
Yeah.
Many years I've always wondered at, amazed at how these children can.
Very challenging to see movements of mind with your eyes open.
Also why we have standing meditation, so that you practice sitting, and then you also use sight, you also develop how to work with sight. On standing meditation, you can eyes open.
So we can neutralize. If you want to be able to feel your body, okay, with your eyes open, soften your eyes. Now you can listen to your body. And that's how dominant our eyes are. Okay?
I want to go to a base level and ask, why do you meditate? Like in between all of these phases that we were discussing, and is it only to observe these attachments or these say levels that are happening?
Okay.
What is the purpose?
Okay. So the Buddha said you only come to meditation for one reason, and that is dukkha. However that presents. And dukkha is, you know, something which is creating resistance in you. Suffering is a poor translation of the word dukkha, because it's such a universal experience. Okay, but something that's creating resistance. And even experiencing dukkha is not sufficient to guarantee you'll meditate. Because if you experience dukkha, one of the options is distraction. Distraction. And the world turns on distraction. Okay? So you have distraction as a possibility, or you have inquiry. And it's the inquiry about dukkha, which is what we're meditating for.
What my answer is always is that we do whatever we do in our life with our mind. But that is the tool which we are there in the world. But the tool which we are kind of dealing with the world is the only thing we are blind to, and how it functions and how it works. So it is like the only tool which we have. The mind is chief, mind mettā. But we are not kind of working with the mind. That's the reason the precept of alcohol which is there. I say it is not a moral principle, kind of a precept. It is a functional. It's a practical, because when you are having that, you are kind of harming the only tool which you have. So it's not a moral judgment the Buddha is making about that, but he's saying that the practical thing is you are working with your mind, and but just to know which is the tool which you have to interact with the world, which is your mind, and that we are knowing the least about, because when we have something like a kind of specs, we know how it is kind of affecting our vision. But when we have no specs, we don't know what is affecting our vision. I will tell you the story of how I got my specs. I was in a restaurant next to VT station. There was a McDonald's open. So that was one of the first McDonald's which came in India. So we were sitting in the McDonald's. I was over here, and where Prasanna is sitting, somebody was sitting. So I was just, I was with my two of my cousin brothers and my sister, and we are sitting. I was just looking into the space, and my sister was kind of engaged in a kind of very heated conversation or something. Her specs were over here. Okay, I was like, Prasanna is here, and I'm just looking at it. And just I took her specs, and I wore the specs, and there was an angry man looking back at me. And I said, "What happened? I can't see this man." Because I could not see that man. And this man was looking, he was saying, "Why is he kind of staring at me?" But then I kind of said, "I have to go to kind of check my eyes." And this guy, huh? Huh?
In a sense, it was a blessing.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. Just like, and then I went to this shop, and he said, "You have 1.5. How did you kind of go through life?" Well, I said, "I did not know." But he said, "It is unique because you are not getting headache or anything, because in both the eyes, I have found never that every perfect eyesight is the same number." So I was always going through life without having, with having this blind sight, without not having a vision, which is a good vision. And I was at that time I was kind of in sales, and I was out about in the streets and all these things. But I never. So that, I think, is the reason why we do meditation. We don't know that we need the additional glasses. And when we come to know, oh, this is the way it is functioning. Oh, this something I can use in life.
This phenomenon that we're talking about, different things being salient to different people at different points, is this where sankharas come in? Is that dependent on?
Well, the sankharas, they're actions of body, speech, and mind, and they are conditioned by past karma. Okay, so we can maybe we'll go through this, because we've done the essence of the Sutta. So one way of looking at this is the experience from one moment to the next. Okay, so whatever our relationship to the present moment now conditions what our the circumstances of entering the next moment. And the sankharas are that link, if you like. They're influenced by the karma. So whatever we experience is the product of past karma. Okay, it's not worth trying to explore what that is, because the Buddha said, if you try to understand the mechanism of karma, you'll simply go mad. Okay, it's so unbelievably complex. But then our relationship to that, whether we take it personally or not, how we relate to it, determines whether our future, the karma that we generate. And so if we have the I like it or not, don't like it, we're adding to that energy of that karmic manifestation. Okay. When we release from the craving, we don't generate that. Okay. So, these volitions, this volitional formations, they're that expression. So, so describing dependent origination, we start off here with ignorance, and ignorance is, the opposite of wisdom. And we've talked in previous talks on this retreat about what is wisdom. Okay, and we can think of the whole sort of panoply of knowledge, and that's not what wisdom is in the Buddhist context. In the Buddhist context, wisdom is about understanding impermanence, that things are always liable to change. Because they're liable to change, if we have an attachment to them, it's going to create dukkha, some sense of resistance, because we're going to resist their changing. So because they're changing, they're not under our personal control. And that's the nature of anatta, recognizing that lack of personal control over these things. Anatta. So you've got anicca, dukkha, anatta. So the three marks. Okay. Another aspect of wisdom is understanding the fact that dukkha exists, that this sense of resistance exists. Not that everything is dukkha, but that everything has the capacity for dukkha depending on how we relate to it. Okay? So, what is the arising of dukkha? Taking something personally. That's the craving. The I like it, I don't like it mind. The I want it, I don't want it mind. What's the cessation of dukkha? Not taking it personally. How do we not take it personally? How do we not take it personally? 6 R's. That's the process of not taking it personally. And because we take it not, when we take it, not take it personally, we see its impermanence. Yeah? And the fourth noble truth is, well, how do we develop that capacity? Well, that's the Eightfold Path, okay, of which, we're exploring through the process of meditation all the time. And one of the first stages of that is right view. And we're developing this right view based on the knowledge that's being imparted and the understanding that's coming, and right effort. And what's the expression of right effort? The 6 R's. Yeah, this is an expression of right effort. So these are the foundational building blocks of the Eightfold Path. Okay, and then the third aspect of wisdom is understanding what we're looking at today, which is dependent origination, and seeing it play out in our experience continuously. So when we have that, we're addressing ignorance. But the level of ignorance is different for different understandings. We get a basic understanding and we kind of feel, yeah, I've got a handle on how things are going. But that understanding gets deeper and deeper as it becomes embedded and embodied as an experiential reality. So you're not just observing it and go, oh, I understand. You're, as it were, feeling it as it goes through. Okay. So until we're at that level, we're always going to have ignorance. So ignorance is what starts this whole thing off. From that, we get the sankharas, these volitional expressions of karmic consequence. Okay, and karma simply means action. Okay, we have, the New Age environment has brought the word karma into much more sort of popular use, and we talk, oh, my bad karma, my good karma. No, karma means action. It's our relationship to the action which determines this. Okay. Then we have consciousness. Okay. So this is, if you like, our potentiality. It's not the consciousness of the six senses. It's the fact that, you know, consciousness and the next step, name and form, are interdependent. The Buddha said, you know, you don't have consciousness without name and form. You don't have name and form without consciousness. There's this interdependency of it. And with name and form, so that's materiality and mentality, that in itself then creates the sense doors. And we have 6 sense doors. You look at the different animals, they have different sense doors. There's nothing unique about our sense doors. They just happen to be the ones we've got, and they're our doorway to the outer world. They're the only way we experience the outer world. A fly with its sensitivity to the infrared sees the world in a completely different way. So in some sense, there's nothing real about the way we see the world, because change your senses and you see it in a completely different way. Okay, so we can be quite arrogant, if you like, and say, you know, about it. The world is like this. Well, no, our experience of the world is like this. And with those sense doors, as we see in this sutta, given the eye, form, eye consciousness arises. So with the meeting of those 3 comes contact. Okay, so now we've got contact present. And contact is when, if you like, is the synaptic movement in the brain, which starts the cognizing process. Up to that point, it wasn't. Yeah.
Had a little but also related question. What happens when we're in a space where there is formlessness, like the state where we talk about formlessness and no sense of boundary or space? What happens with contact there?
When we're in the formless realms, all we have, when we're completely in the formless realm, is mind and contact of mind.
Only that.
Yes,
No,
until a fly lands on your arm, and then you have contact. Okay. So until that point, until there's a direct sensory impact, we don't see anything.
Or you direct your attention to the where you are sitting, then you can feel you're sitting.
So here's a classic case of attention creating the experience. So now we begin to see just how we create our experience with our attention. Yeah. Okay. So with contact comes feeling. Okay. And consciousness of all the senses. So you've got, it's part of the khandhas. So you get feeling, contact brings feeling, and with feeling comes feeling, perception, and consciousness of the khandhas. And the khandhas are your body, feeling, consciousness, the sankharas in this sense, which is basically all mental activity, which is not perception or feeling. Okay, so that's the loving kindness you're bringing up. It's anger. It's, you know, anything that's in the mind. Okay, and the consciousness of those. All right. So, with feeling, that's what's generated. Okay, and then we have our relationship to feeling. Are we taking it personally or not? That's the tanha. If we're not taking it personally, it all falls away at that point. If we do take it personally, then we have upadana. And upadana is the story about why we like it or don't like it, why we want it or don't want it. And then with,
Yeah, this one.
oh yes,
Can there be also instances when in real time we're able to recognize that?
sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Can there also be some instances wherein in real time, and I'm not talking during the state of meditation, there are generally suggest a thought toxin or an emotion toxin which is discomforting. But within seconds we realize, okay, now I'm taking this personally, let me drop this perspective. Then when you drop that perspective of not taking it personally, it's natural for you to feel mettā, love, understanding towards the situation. But then while processing the entire situation or whatever it is, the thought, there is another story to it, no? What I'm trying to say is, this is beautiful, but the story is still there. You start looking at the situation in a very different light.
You
with
do,
very expanded
but if,
mind and
but
thought.
only if you continue to pay it attention.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, releasing away from it and not getting involved in it in the same way, but still allowing it to play through and paying it attention might give you more understanding, but you're still not meditating. Okay? All right. So the clinging is that story about why I like it or don't like it, you know. And these are all, you know, everything that's in the card index in the back here, you know. And so, you know, the experiences come up, and then we go through the card index. What are all my beliefs and opinions and thoughts and ideas and concepts around this thing, you know? And it all comes through. I like to think of this as a tsunami. Yeah. Okay. And then we feel overwhelmed. Yeah? And then we get carried along by that big wave. Yeah? Okay. So this is the clinging. This is the story, and then we have you know, the bhava is becoming, but we can think of bhava as creating. If it's, you know, we're now in this process of creation, and the habitual tendencies, behavioral tendencies, are just we're harnessing all our previous resources around whatever this is.
So Bhante used to say that if this happens, I do this. So that is your habitual tendencies. So if a sound happens, I say I don't like it. Or you see a shop, I say okay, I'll go shop over there, or something like that. Or you see a favorite dish and say I'll have a bite of it. That's what if this happens, I do that. That's the habitual.
And these can be really convincing, and so much so that you just don't see them. No, I remember as a young child, I didn't like the teacher I had in kindergarten. We just didn't get on, and so I would be stubborn. And they would serve pancakes, and I'd say, I don't like pancakes. Well, you should try them. I don't like them. You stand in the corner. And for about 14 years, I didn't like pancakes. And then one day I tried a pancake.
Pancakes.
And I loved pancakes. But my habit had been, I don't like pancakes because it represented the attitude I took. Yeah. And we don't question these beliefs, these habits, these stories that we tell ourselves, because they're part of our identity. And the identity there was standing up for myself. So why would I give up standing up for myself by eating a pancake? And these interrelationships are so complex. So if we look here, and Sister Kimo created this, she described it as the personal library of habitual reactions which occur when a sense door cognizes something. Each person has a personal library of their most used reactions to things that happen. So that's the card index. It's unique to all of us.
One of the kind of stories which is there, there was a lot of documentaries which was I used to watch, was about some shaman going to the sea, and he used to kind of do their practices over there in the sea at the foot of the kind of cliff. So somebody said, one of the shamans said, I think the sea is not right. There were ships approaching the island. There were Columbus's clipper ships, 2 or 3 of them were approaching. So then they would go every day to kind of do their rituals, and they said there is something wrong. Then one of the shamans said, see the waves are not correct over here. When they kind of started putting their attention on the waves, they saw the ship. So that is an example of the personal library. They have never had a concept of ships on the sea. So when there were ships, they were only seeing the sea, not seeing the ships. And that kind of is that library which Sister Kema is talking about. Sometimes we kind of can't react to things which are we have never reacted to or something like that. Sometimes we say we froze because we did not know what to do, because the library has no kind of next step kind of.
What is the Pali word for that type of script?
Bhava.
And with Bhava comes the birth, jati, birth of action. Okay, when we think of it in terms of our moment-to-moment reality, we could also think of this structure as from one life to the next. Okay, so with birth of action, we have 3 kinds of action. We have mental action, we have verbal action, we have physical action. Okay. And then with birth comes death, yes, aging and death. Well, in this case, it's seeing the arising of action or the rising of whatever is occurring, and then the death of what is ever occurring, whatever the event is. So the event ages, and so as it does, so any sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair happen. And then there is the death of that event, and that disappears. So what we have here is a practical description of what's occurring in each moment as we progress through that. And recognize, you see, that this is a context. We're seeing a process. So when we're meditating, we're not meditating on a single moment. We're meditating on a present time rather than a present moment, because all of this is being played out in however short a time it is, but it's being played out in a time. And we need to see the playing out to understand what's going on. Yeah. Any questions? No? All right.
First time I heard it in
Dear.
it just blew my mind. This whole, but it was so clear that the Buddha could see it so clearly. Nowhere else in any other philosophy, anywhere you get this kind of thing.
Well, I have to say I'm extremely grateful to Bhante Vimaramsi, because it was unusual to teach from the Suttas in the 90s when he was doing so, and when I came across him in the 2000s, I was fortunate to be part of a Buddhist study group in the UK where we were based on the suttas, but we were based on the suttas which was a different translation to this, and the language was from the Victorian period, and it was quite arcane.
Archaic language, it's difficult.
Yeah, I.B. Horner and other translators, and it didn't have the clarity of this translation. And when this translation came out, which was
92 or 90.
let's just have a look, 95.
90.
In 95, I remember we had access to it as part of the group, and we started comparing the two, and it was almost like we were reading two different things. You could see the correspondence, but the clarity was very different. Yes.
One thing, one German monk was there in Thailand when I was there. He used to say that German translation was so bad that they were saying that the monks were going back and forth. So then there was a clarification. For some reasons, the monks would walk back and forth in the Buddha's time. Because they did not know what was the walking meditation. For some reason, they do that.
And so, you know, hat off to Bhikkhu Bodhi. He has done the most extraordinary piece of scholarship. And it has made such a fundamental difference. Because prior to this, I'll pick up in a minute, prior to this, the teaching of dependent origination was extremely complex. It was almost impenetrable. And this translation has made it accessible and relatable. And then Bhante Vimramsi integrated it in to the practice in a way that has made it real to see and experience. Yeah.
How long before were you actually struggling with the?
I've been, I suppose, 10 years in that group. Yeah.
Was 10 years you had left? Okay, now I can.
Well, no, the other translation, you don't know what you're missing until you see something new. So you know, the translations were wonderful books. It was inspiring to read them. And then you see something else and you think, this is even better. It's not that I felt any lag. I just felt I didn't understand. I thought this is me. Yeah. And I understand more, but I don't understand completely, because I can read a sutta again many times, and then suddenly I'll see something else. And I'll go, well, surely that line hasn't just appeared. You know?
But I find that there is a whole series of lectures which Bhikkhu Bodhi has given on each of the sutras. And then it's so fascinating. You listen to Bhikkhu Bodhi and then you listen to Bhante Vimramsi or Delson or somebody from the Twin family. And it is quite fascinating how the same sutras are then interpreted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the series of lectures by Bhikkhu Bodhi is outstanding. They go into great detail. He reads them out and he explains. Really fantastic.
One of the things she asked was Bhante Vimramsi did 22 years of the meditation practice without reading suttas. The most of the kind of the traditions would give them commentaries or books based on commentaries like Vishuddhamaka. So that's the reason when he got this thing, it was kind of a life-changing moment for her. And Hugh said that he was already reading, but imagine somebody who is doing meditation for 22 years. 2-year retreat he had just completed, 2 years in meditation retreat. And he still saw that I'm not understanding what is happening. And then he reads the Buddha's words. And one of the things is that currently there are many teachers who are teaching. But when he was teaching at that point of time, he was the only one. So about 30 years back, he was kind of started with the suttas.
Suttavadis.
That is what he kind of said. It is not the actual Sutta of this, but he just made he said, I think because he's using Sutta, and he said we are Suttavadas.
Yeah. And the beauty of that is that you then, what you're hearing is my interpretation and Bhante's interpretation of the sutta, but we're reading from the sutta. And those are two different things. And if there comes a time when you feel our interpretation isn't what you agree with, you can go back to the same place. It's not that we're giving a talk which is this is our understanding and we're not referencing something. So then you can go back and go, well, what's my understanding of this paragraph? And this is really important. Yeah? You should, the Kalama Sutta says you should never take things based on the fact that your teacher has told you. Yeah? Yeah? And the Kalama Sutta is in here, or the relevant passage is in here. Do read it because it helps you with your relationship with us. Yeah?
That's so beautiful because in school and college we've been told to just listen to and follow what the teacher says. And here is Buddha saying, don't take me on my way.
Yes. Yeah. Particularly in India and Asian countries, there's a reverence to the teacher, which is your task is simply to listen, not to question and not to have opinions, and probably not to really to ask any questions.
I've done one long thing on Vedanta many years ago, and that gentleman used to not allow us to question many things. He used to just say, just listen.
Yeah.
Why are you asking these questions? So it used to be very, I used to go all the way to a place in Delhi and listen to the lectures on Vedanta, and I used to find it was very difficult.
And the whole, somebody was saying that Buddha, as you were saying, that the Buddha found this out. So there are many suttas where the Bodhisattva, he has not become a Buddha, he is investigating. He's saying that, what is the reason for death? Why do people die? So surely because they are born. Because they are born, they die. Then he said, oh, but why are they born? Oh, there is some becoming, or kind of over here we say habitual tendencies. Because of that, there is a birth. But why is that becoming coming about? And then he says, oh, there is some clinging which is there. And because of that, this is happening. They say, why is the clinging happening? Oh, there is some craving which is there. So he's examining his mind and kind of coming up with the whole of the thing. So this is the same process. Another Buddha, I think Buddha Vipassi in Digha Nikaya is also. He's also kind of sitting when he is a Bodhisattva and kind of examining. So it is a kind of personal examination. And certain times what happens is when you are dealing with interviews and everything, so somebody will say, how do you know this kind of thing? I was feeling this way because I am feeling that way and I know myself, then I can kind of relate to you. And that is the same thing Buddha is. He's seeing himself and then knowing that, okay, everybody is the same. So Bhante also say that everybody, even the Western or the Eastern people, they all think the same way. That means that the dependent origination process is same. So even a kind of a tribal person or a person in the Andaman Nicobar Islands, his process of cognition is the same. That does not change. The content changes. So that is a kind of interesting thing that it is from his own examination, his mind's own examination, he comes up with this thing. It is not a kind of a divine revelation.
So
another interesting fact, after many Buddhist monks have started teaching in the US, I found a big change in the way Sarvapriyananda teaches Vedanta. Because earlier his gurus and others would not permit questions, would not permit inquiry. But now, because of the Buddhist influence, because it's become so popular now. There are these Buddhist teachings and people giving lectures and asking questions. And how that is actually changing the Hindu Vedantic tradition, at least in the West, is not yet come here. Hopefully one day it will come.
I would disagree. Like Ramana Maharshi has like volumes of books.
No,
on
no, not
questions.
Ramana Maharishi. I'm talking about the Vedantic school, which is actually teaching Vedanta. Not Ramana Maharishi. Ramana
He's also
Maharishi
Vedanta.
never said really what I'm a teacher anyway.
That's an interesting thing. I never knew that.
Actually, they say even the way Shastras is read is you read, you understand, then it seeps in.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be that way.
Yes.
even Shastras.
Yes. Yeah.
So there is
It's a-
encouragement to dialogue. Even in Shastras.
Some people have introduced it in Hinduism. Ramana Maharshi was originally, but he was never really a teacher. But the person who tried to do that was Chinmayananda, actually. This whole elaboration of the Upanishads and the Gita and these dialogues. I remember as a teenager, I used to take my grandfather to these talks. He was quite old, so I had to drive him there and sit with him and come back. And that tradition wasn't there before many of these teachers who came in through the social reform.
They say even Adi Shankaracharya's way of this is
Must have
7th
been
century
different, yeah.
was debate and was discussion and
It was
was
a different
question.
part of the Hindu
Correct.
Shastras.
Yeah.
That I've heard and
Yeah.
But what I
Probably
think,
you had a bad.
what I think we're confirming is the value of dialogue, discussion, and asking questions. You know, this is really important. The other thing to recognize is that if all of this was lost, it would be recreated by someone who had the right capacity, because this isn't a transmitted teaching that isn't based on observation. So it's like if all of science disappeared, it would eventually all be recreated again. But if we lost literature, for instance, we're not going to recreate Shakespeare or something else, because there isn't anything which means that's going to happen. So in that sense, just like science, this is like science. It is the science of the mind. Yeah.
And Buddha says that even if the Buddha is there or not, when there is ignorance, there will be kind of formations. And if there is formation, there will be consciousness. So he says there is a Buddha or not, it is independent of the interpreter. So if there is Newton or not, there will be gravity. In that sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, now I have no idea how far I got. But,
I may be over here.
I think it might be 19. Friends, when the Blessed One rose from his seat. Friends, when the Blessed One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling, after giving a summary and brief, without expounding the detailed meaning, that is, student, as the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a student, if nothing is found there to delight in, welcome, and hold to, this is the end of the underlying tendency to lust, aversion, views, doubt, conceit, desire for being, ignorance, and resorting to rods and weapons of quarrels, brawls, disputes, recrimination, malicious words, and false speech. Here these evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. I've always found it very helpful to have Bhante Vimaramas's definition of the unwholesome, which is anything we take personally. We have an image of the unwholesome as things which are sort of uniquely bad. Anything we take personally is an unwholesome state. Okay? I understand the detailed meaning of this summary to be thus. Now, friends, if you wish, go to the Blessed One and ask him about the meaning of this. As the Blessed One explains it to you, so you should remember it. Then the students, having delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Mahakachana's words, arose from their seats and went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, they sat down at one side and told the Blessed One all that had taken place after he had left, adding, "Then, Venerable Sir, we went to the Venerable Mahakachana and asked him about the meaning. The Venerable Mahakachana expounded the meaning to us in these terms, statements, and phrases." So they had the capacity to regurgitate what he had actually said in the complete form. Okay. Mahakachana is wise, students. Mahakachana has great wisdom. If you had asked me the meaning of this, I would have explained it to you in the same way that Mahakachana has explained it. Such is the meaning of this, and so you should remember it. When this was said, the Venerable Ananda said to the Blessed One, "Venerable Sir, just as if a man exhausted by hunger and weakness came upon a honey ball, wherever he would taste it, he would find a sweet, delectable flavor. So too, Venerable Sir, any able-minded student, wherever they might scrutinize with wisdom the meaning of this discourse on the Dharma, would find satisfaction and confidence of mind." Does that sound familiar? Yes, having heard this? Okay. Venerable Sir, what is the name of this discourse on Dharma? As to that, Ananda, you may remember this discourse on the Dharma as the honey ball discourse. In other words, it's so sweet. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Ananda was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words.
They are talking about laddu. Yeah, we should have, whenever there is honey ball, we should have laddu.
Okay, any questions? Okay. I always enjoy the honey ball, so I never get tired of reading it because it's so relatable. Yeah.
And this is one of the suttas which every time I kind of read, I kind of find some kind of angle in this, some kind of thing. It took me a lot of time to kind of really absorb this thing. Because it is in a way it is going off the normal path of the dependent origination also, as it starts from the perception. There is a feeling, this thing, rather than kind of go through the craving and clinging. It is incorporating that in the same thing and the mental proliferation. And one day I used to like a book based on this mental proliferation, which was called Concept and Reality. The Katukaranta Jnanananda. Jnanananda or Jnanananda. Jnanananda is also one of the Jnanananda. But it is also mentioned as Jnanananda in some of the Sri Lankan thing. So, but it is Jnanananda. So, Katukaranta Jnanananda is this is available free. But they actually once asked me to kind of get this printed 1,000 copies and send it to him. So I kind of helped, I contacted the trust who has the rights to print it. We got 1,000 copies, and I used to kind of give it also. I kept 200 copies and distributed it. So we can kind of, they kind of say that it is not kind of so much, but you can get a PDF. You can just search Concept and Reality.
Somebody reading it out also, all the chapters is available.
To understand.
Yeah, it's written as kind of like an academic treatise. It's not bedtime reading, but it's almost the last word on proliferation in the sense of understanding what it is and why understanding it is so important. Yeah.
One of the suttas is about, I think Aniruddha is thinking about all the things which are important in the Dhamma. And then he's kind of going through this, and then the Buddha kind of appears before him and said, "You have not considered prapancha sanya sankhara." Then he says that is also one part of the most important thing. And he kind of incorporates it into that, and then he becomes an arhat. So it is such an important kind of thing where it could be a part of the changing of your perspective.
What does the book like talk about? Like mental proliferation, we all understand.
Ah.
What does it?
It talks about
Concept and Reality in Early Buddhist Thought is the name of the book.
So he has a PhD thesis he did, but he could not submit it because he was ill. So it was kind of the whole study of this concept in all the suttas. So he goes through detail in depth in that sense. So he goes to every sutta where this prapancha is mentioned, or prapancha sanya sankhara is mentioned. Interestingly, prapancha is also the word we use in India for samsara. No? It's a synonym. Prapancha is all the thinking and mental proliferation. If you think of all these things which is there in this room, it was there in somebody's mind before it became a reality. So the prapancha which we are talking about is the world. World is mind made. So that is the concept which is there. That all this mental activity is creating all these things which is there, and thus that whole concept is very central to our changing of perspective and how we look at things. It's a kind of heavy read, as he also mentioned. What Bante said, one thing it can easier to make it read is don't read the Pali thing. So you skip the Pali and just read what he has mentioned, and that could also be good enough, because there is a lot of Pali quoting which is there, and he has to be very precise. No? So all this footnotes, they have a lot of footnotes and everything that you can kind of skip and just read what he has mentioned, and that would be good enough.
Yes, it's only so thick. It's not a big tome. It's yeah. Okay. I think we're done.
Thank you so much.
May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fears are fearless be.
May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness.
May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's